All right, everyone. Hello, welcome to my channel. I assume I know most of you guys, everyone watching this right now, since it's my first video, is probably all my friends, people I know somehow. But regardless, welcome to my channel. This is my first content video I've pretty much ever made. I recently started my own website, my own sports website to talk about sports. I'm a huge sports guy. For anyone that knows me, that's probably the first thing they'll tell you about me. And I figured, why not? I'm gonna make sports content because, yeah, I love sports, and why not? So, for my first YouTube video, what I decided to do was today is the NFL opener. We get Ravens and Chiefs later tonight. So I decided to pull up a tier list of all the teams, and I'm just gonna throw all the teams into the tiers I think they belong in and kind of break down my thoughts. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoy the video and welcome again. I'll just dive straight into it. Now let me exit that first. All right, so first team, we get the Saints here. I will put them as a potential wild card because I think they definitely are capable of winning the South. A lot of people are down on the Saints this year. Can see why. Dennis Allen, he was kind of 50-50 if he was going to keep his job, but the Saints made a push at the end of the year. They finished 9-8 with the winning record, so they kept him. Saints for years have always just pushed all their salary. The Drew Brees contract, for example, they just push it year after year. They've been in salary cap hell. I still think they get a pretty solid team. They get a good defense. Dennis Allen's a really good defensive coordinator. Derek Carr's, solid. He's he's not as good as he used to be. Still solid. Saints offensive line is kind of a big question mark though. They fired Pete Carmichael, new offensive coordinator for them. I think they still have weapons. Obviously, they got Kamara. He's getting a little older, but he's still a beast. I think Carr's still good. He's serviceable. He'll put up good numbers. I definitely could see the Saints making a push for their division, and if not, potentially maybe getting in the 6, 7 seed. Yeah, I think that pretty much describes the Saints pretty well. Especially, they're in the South, so obviously the Panthers aren't winning the division. Bucks are, kind of stuck in mediocre land. Then the Falcons are, with Captain Kirk Cousins over there, they're kind of reloaded this year. I picked Falcons to win the division in my picks, which I put up on my website. Which I think I attempted to link it to this channel, but I'll have to figure out that later. Um, yeah, I think I had the Saints at 7-10 in my predictions. I feel pretty comfortable saying that they're going to be around a 7-win team. Moving on, we got the Dolphins here. Dolphins are, I feel like they're in between these two, but I'll just give them the benefit of the doubt and throw them in the playoff teams. I mean, they're loaded. They get Tyreek, they got Waddle, they get a really good defense, even though they just moved on from Vic Fangio, who's a really good DC, but did not work out well. Players did not like him a lot. They just paid Tua. Obviously, Mike McDaniel, really good offensive coach, really unlocked Tua after Brian Flores, who Tua just ripped in an interview the other day. I love Brian Flores. I'm a big Pats guy, so love B Flow. Um, yeah, Dolphins, I feel like definitely are a playoff. I mean, they both Mike McDonald years, or sorry, I always get the Mike mixed up. Mike McDaniel years, they fizzled out towards the end of the year. 2 years ago, they were, I think, 8-3, and then they finished 9-8. And granted, Tua got hurt; they were dealing with injuries. Last year, they finished 11-6, are dealing with injuries. Obviously, got blown out in the wild card round by the Chiefs. But obviously, they're going to make a playoff push. They're a really good team. Now we get the Ravens. I will put the Ravens in Super Bowl contenders. The Ravens, they lost Mike McDonald to the Seahawks, who's a really, really good defensive coach. The Ravens were like number one in pretty much every defensive category last season. So I think that's a pretty notable loss. But regardless, they always have a good defense, stout defense, well coached. John Harbaugh, really good coach. They got Lamar, Todd Monken, Derrick Henry. He's going to be a friggin' beast. It's going to be interesting to see how they use him because he's obviously more of a power runner. And the system they've used is, more receiving backs, more quick, elusive backs. And obviously, Henry's just more of a straight power runner. But I think the Ravens going to be a tank this year. They'll probably be an 11, 12 win team. That's probably my guess. I think they'll definitely sneak into the playoff, or not even sneak into the playoffs. I think they'll definitely just get in the playoffs. Think a lot of people are picking them to win the AFC North. I actually have the Bengals winning the AFC North, but I could definitely see the Ravens winning. I think it's, you can make a good argument for the Ravens. Bengals, I'm going to put in Super Bowl contenders. In my full season predictions, I actually have the Bengals as my Super Bowl champion, which I'm getting ripped for. A lot of people are ripping me for that, but I'm going to put them in the Super Bowl contenders. Part of me thinks they could have a down year this year. They lost Tyler Boyd. Obviously, that's not a big huge loss, but he was pretty solid for them, pretty serviceable, pretty consistent. He was like there forever. He was there with Andy Dalton. And defense, they always get a really solid defense. Julian Arumo, really good DC. What other thoughts on the Bengals do I have? Obviously, Joe Burrow is back. Hopefully, he stays healthy. Obviously, if Joe Burrow goes down, I'm not picking them to win the Super Bowl. I'm assuming Burrow is going to stay healthy. They got Jamar out there. They franchise tag T. Higgins. But big reason of why I have them in the Super Bowl is because they turn it up towards the end of the year, heading into the playoffs, and they have a pretty easy schedule. If you go game by game, they have a pretty easy schedule. So I actually have them getting the 1 seed based on my predictions. So yeah, I think the Bengals are definitely a Super Bowl contender. Again, I picked them to win, but I don't know if I want to put them to the favorites. I'll have to think about it as this video goes on. Broncos, we get the first team, the number 1 pick contention. Actually, I think it's kind of a toss-up between these two tiers, but Bo Nix, really good in the preseason. Obviously, not going to put a lot of stock into the preseason, but Bo Nix did look really good in the preseason. You had Sean Payton over there, who gets a lot of hate. He's obviously a really good offensive coach. Obviously, I think Drew Brees for a majority of his career helped with that. But the Broncos, I think they're basically acknowledging that they're kind of in a rebuilding stage. They're shipping some of their veteran players off. Obviously, they're starting Bo Nix right out of the gate. So I think, the Broncos, they get a lot to work on before they're contenders again, which it's been that way for a while. They almost snuck in last year and they got red hot and were playing like one of the best teams in the league, but they still get a lot to work on for now. Giants, I'm going to put them in this tier, but it's tempting to put them in this tier. My buddy Dylan, sorry if you're watching this. I know you're a big Giants guy. You get high hopes of them this year, but not like the Broncos. The Giants, I think, are trying to win now, but I just am not big Daniel Jones guy like most people. Obviously, he had a pretty solid 2022, but that was kind of a Cinderella year for the Giants. They started out 6-1, pretty sure, and a lot of the wins they had were, going down to the last play of the game, kind of fluky fashion, getting, I don't want to say lucky wins because they deserved it and they earned it, but I guess if you look at it a probability wise, some of the games they won were not very high probability. I don't know how to word it, but you guys probably know what I'm talking about. Obviously, yeah, they got Daniel Jones. I think Malik Nabers, he's going to be a tank. I sure hope so for my fantasy teams. I'm in 6 leagues. I think he's on 2 or 3 of my teams. So I hope Nabers is beast. Obviously, they lost Saquon. That's a huge loss. They threw Singletary in there, who was pretty solid with the Texans last year. Giants offensive line, obviously that was an absolute disaster last year. It's still very much question mark this year. I think Giants still have a solid defense. but they lost Wink Martindale, who I thought was a good fit. I just think they got a lot of work to do. But Brian Daboll is a really good coach. Even last year, with all the injuries and the things that went against them, they still finished with a solid record. A lot of close losses. That Bills game sticks out to me. First thing that popped into my head when they probably should have got a PI on Darren Waller in the end zone. That was with Tyrod Taylor starting. The first Eagles game, they had Taylor start, and that was kind of when the Eagles were first struggling, beginning their downfall the back half of the last year. But they were thrown into the end zone for a chance to tie it with a 2-point conversion at the end of the game there. Couple of close losses for the Giants here last year. I think their ceiling is kind of mediocre at best, but I'm going to leave them here for now. Vikings, I'm going to throw them in mediocre at best. Poor Vikings, poor Vikings. JJ McCarthy looked really good in the season, or the preseason, sorry. And then obviously got hurt, out for the year. Now you get Sam Darnold, who, oh boy, he has potential. He was the third pick for a reason. He's shown that he can be a solid quarterback at times. I think Kevin O'Connell is one of the most underrated coaches in the league. Love Kevin O'Connell, love his offensive system. Him and Kirk Cousins, such an efficient offense. I really enjoyed watching their offense and breaking down film of it afterwards. Just love that. Love his offensive scheme. Last year, obviously, the Vikings, I think they finished 7-10, I'm pretty sure. They were 0-3 to start. They lost 3 straight close games to start the year, and then they kind of got hot. And then obviously Kirk tore his Achilles, and they had Josh Dobbs go in for his insanity run, and then that fizzled out. And then they had a rotation of quarterbacks. They had Mullins, they had Jaron Hall in there for a bit, and yeah, they got derailed by injuries, but they were still a really good team. And a lot of their games they lost were super close, like I'm talking about, and they very easily could have been a playoff team if some of the couple plays went their way. But that's a what if scenario. If Kirk Cousins was there last year, the whole year, I definitely think they're in the playoffs. But Sam Darnold, I think having Kevin O'Connell, like I'm talking about, will help him with O'Connell's kind of quarterback friendly scheme. But yeah, they're also getting a lot of injuries, especially defensively. They have my guy Brian Flores there coordinating the defense, but yeah, I think maybe you can make an argument they'll be in this tier, but I think I might leave them there for now. We got the Rams here. I definitely am going to put the Rams in playoff team tier. I think the Rams are a big sleeper team. They're getting some noise talked about them this year. Obviously, they made it last year. They probably should have beaten the Lions in the wild card. There's a couple bad calls that went against them, especially at the end of the game there. There should have been a holding, or I think it was holding, or PI, one of the two. I think it was holding. I want to say on Puka towards the end of the game there that really kind of screwed them over. But again, the Lions were really good last year. They deserved to win that game. The Rams this year, I think, are going to be really good. Stafford was phenomenal last year when he was healthy. He missed a couple games. Their defense, they lost Raheem Morris, obviously, to the Falcons. I think that might be a big blow. Raheem Morris is a really good defensive coordinator. Even 2 years ago, when the Rams had their Super Bowl hangover, they went 5-12, I'm pretty sure. They were beat to hell everywhere. He still had that defense competing at a really pretty high level, considering the talent he had. And then the year before, when they won the Super Bowl in the playoffs, that defense was clicking on all cylinders. They played great. So Raheem Morris, I think that's kind of a big loss to them. Obviously, Aaron Donald, when you lose one of the best defensive players of all time, that's going to be a big loss. So I think their defense will be solid. It'll be okay, but obviously, I think it's going to take a step down from the Raheem Morris-led Rams defense. But I think the Rams this year are going to be really good. I could see them competing with the Niners for the NFC West title. I don't think they'll win it unless the Niners get a lot of injuries like they have in years past, and kind of seems like they're getting injuries now too, which is concerning me a little bit. But I'm going to leave the Rams in here. I think they are a really good team, really good sleeper team this year. We get the Bucks. I'm going to put them in the wild card, and I'll actually switch the order here because I think the Bucks have more of a chance than the Saints at winning their division. I think the Bucks, if I had to put a probability on the Bucks winning the NFC South, I'd probably say 40%, and then put the 60% on the Falcons, just between those two teams. Panthers obviously have a low percentage, and the Saints, I think a lot of things would have to bounce their way for them to win the division. I really think realistically it's just between the Bucks and the Falcons. Obviously, the Bucks last year, they started off hot, 3-1, and then they kind of fizzled out. You know, Todd Bowles, his job was on the line, and then they got red hot. They played really well the rest of the year. They finished 9-8. And yeah, they obviously won the division. They beat the Eagles in the wild card round. And then they lost to the Lions in the divisional round. Pretty competitive, close game. And yeah, they far exceeded expectations last year. Everyone thought they were going to be one of the worst teams in the league after Brady left. And towards the middle of the season, it was looking like that. But then again, they got hot and they won out, except that Saints game, week 17. They just played awful. Besides that, they played really well. Pretty much the same team this year. They lost Devin White. I don't know if that's a big loss to them, which I wouldn't be saying that a couple of years ago. But obviously, Devin White had issues last year. Attitude issues, I guess, is the best way to put it. And Bucks defense is going to be solid. Todd Bowles, not a big fan of him as a head coach. A big Tom Brady guy. I think he was a big reason why the Bucks far did not exceed expectations 2 years ago with Brady's last year. I think he was just too passive as a head coach. He is too passive. But as a DC, I really like Todd Bowles. I love his defensive scheme. Blitzes a lot, super aggressive. Really like Todd Bowles' defensive scheme. So they'll have a good defense under Bowles. They still got a lot of good guys. They had Vea, David. They did lose Carlton Davis though, which that's going to be a pretty big loss. Offensively, obviously they get Baker, Evans, Godwin. They get Rachaad White, have him in 3 of my leagues, I think. They did lose Dave Canales to Carolina, who I think was a pretty solid OC, but I think the Bucks will be around a 9-ish win team. I feel pretty comfortable putting them in that range, saying they're going to win around 9 games. Then we get the Lions. I'm going to put them in Super Bowl contenders. Actually, if I had to reorder this is probably going to be controversial, but I'll put Cincy 1, if I can move it correctly. Cincy 1, Detroit 2, Baltimore 3. But anyway, back to the Lions. I think the Lions this year, I have them in the Super Bowl in my predictions. They should have made it last year. They didn't blow it to the 49ers. They were 24-7, and they just had everything go against them. They had that insane Ayuk catch off the deflection. Then they had obviously the Gibbs fumbled, and then they had the Josh Reynolds drops, and they just completely collapsed. I felt so awful for them. They probably would have lost to the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. We never know. Everyone would have been rooting for them though. But I think they just got better than they were this past season. Obviously, offensively, they were one of the best offenses in the league. Defensively, they were kind of up and down, but they addressed their defensive needs. Aaron Glenn is, I'm not, I respect Aaron Glenn. I think he's a serviceable defensive coordinator, but not the greatest, but I think he'll have that defense playing well enough where they're going to be one of the elite teams again this year. Just an up and down defense last year. I think it's going to be more consistently well played this year. Offensively, I pretty much expect them to perform like they did last year. I think the Lions are probably a 12-win team like last year, maybe 13. And obviously, I think them and the Packers are going to be competing for the North, but I'm going to give them the edge over the Packers. Here's an interesting team. We get the Bears. I'm going to throw them in the wild card, and I'll put them past the Saints here. And actually, while I'm at mm, yeah, I'll just leave this order here. But getting back to the Bears, they are a massive sleeper team for me this year. A lot of people are liking the Bears. They look great in the preseason. The end of the year last year, I think they finished 5-3, and they had the top scoring defense in that stretch. When Eberflus started to take over the defensive play calling, that much improved from the first half of the year. Eberflus knows how to call a defense. Their offense started clicking a little better. Obviously, they got Shane Waldron after they fired. Why am I blanking on his name? Completely blanking on his name. Luke Getsy. Completely blanked on his name for a second. They fired Luke Getsy, who was, I thought he was okay. I don't think he was bad as people made him out to be, but definitely not, you know, towards the upper echelon of offensive coordinators. Um, Shane Waldron's a good OC. He helped Geno Smith revive his career at the Seahawks. Offensively, they get a lot of weapons. Obviously, they get Caleb Williams, number one pick. They get Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, who was an absolute stud for me in fantasy last year. I think I have him 3 teams this year. They get Allen, Moore. Obviously, they drafted Romeo Odunze. They're just absolutely loaded everywhere. Um, Swift, DeAndre Swift, that was a good free agent signing. I think their offense could be really good this year. Their defense, they did the back half of last year. Their defense could be really good. Oh, sorry, excuse me here. I think their defense could be really good the back half, and they play like they did the back half of last year. I think the Bears could be I think they could sneak into the playoffs. I think I had them, I want to say it's 7 wins in my predictions, but I could definitely see them maybe even getting up to 9 or 10 wins. I am really high in the Bears this year. I think they're a big sleeper team. 49ers, I'm going to throw them right here. I'm just going to really hope that the trend they've had of all the injuries and things not going their way and all the drama with the contract holdouts, Trent Williams, Ayuk, those have just been resolved. They both re-signed them. Going to hope that, clears out and they just get back to playing football this season. Yeah, obviously Niners loaded, made the Super Bowl last year. I'm a little surprised they fired Steve Wilks. Steve Wilks had a couple bad calls last year, like that blitz he had against the Vikings in Monday Night Football with like under 30 seconds left in the half, I think, and Addison ripped it away from the DB there for a touchdown. That's one. He had a couple calls like that, but I think the Niners, I want to say they had the third ranked defense last year overall, and they fired Wilks, and their defense played really well in the Super Bowl. And that's obviously with Greenlaw tore his Achilles going out in the field. I think it was pretty sure it was the first quarter still, and they still played really well after that. But they definitely played well enough to win the Super Bowl. But a little surprised they fired him, but I think their defense will be fine. They obviously absolutely loaded defensively, offensively. Shanahan, love Kyle Shanahan, love his offensive scheme. I think they're obviously, they're going to be another tank this year. I think 13 wins, 14 wins, around that range. Maybe 12 of, by the last week of the regular season, they bench their starters or whatever. But I think they're definitely, I feel comfortable leaving them in the Super Bowl favorite tier. Sorry. Excuse me, guys. Eagles. Oh boy. My buddy Nick, if you're watching this, big Eagles guy. Do I leave them here or do I put them here? You know what? I'll put them here. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Not an Eagles guy. I hate the Eagles. I'm a Patriots fan, so I hate the Eagles. Obviously, the Eagles are loaded this year. It stacked offensive line, even though they lost Kelsey. That'll be a notable loss. All right, guys, I got something stuck in my throat here. Yeah, so they lost Kelsey. That'll be a big loss to them, especially the tush push. He was a big part of that. They got A.J. Brown. They got Devontae Smith. Obviously, hurts his scrambling ability. Saquon, obviously, that's another big free agent sign. They got Vic Fangio calling the defense. I think their defense is going to be much improved from last season. It was just not very well coached last season, especially when Matt Patricia came on, my old buddy from New England. Oh boy, Matt Patricia. But anyway, moving on. Yeah. Kellen Moore offensively, really good offensive coordinator. I think the Eagles are going to be back on track from what they were 2 years ago. The last year they collapsed the end of the year, obviously. They started out 10-1 and won one game after that. It was against the beat to hell Giants, as I talked about. Even that game, they I think were up 17-0. They almost blew it at the end of the game there. Again, Tyrod Taylor was thrown into the end zone with a chance to they scored there to tie it with a 2-point conversion to send it to OT. So yeah, they obviously collapsed last year. Obviously they were a good team, but you don't get to 10-1 unless you're doing something right. But I think, again, I'm not an Eagles guy, so I'm gonna sound a little biased here, but I think they're getting a lot of lucky things to bounce their way. Excuse me. Like the against us week one last year, they had multiple turnovers that deflections, just the ball slipping out. Zeke had a fumble. I think they punched that one out actually, so I just credit to them for that one. But they had a tip pass, pick six. It was their first drive of the season, if I remember correctly. Then week two, they had the bobble with Jefferson as the Vikings wrote to take the lead. Uh, they just had, and then against the Chiefs, they had a couple drops that went their way. They got a lot of things to bounce their way, is all I'm going to say. But again, they're a good team. You don't get to 10-1 unless you're really good. And then the back half of the year, I think once they stopped getting those fluky things to go their way, their bad coaching got exposed. Obviously, Sirianni's under a lot of fire. People want him gone. But anyway, I think they're going to be cleaned up from last year. They're going to be back to pretty much what they were 2 years ago. I think I have them at 12 wins this year. Them and Dallas are going to be back and forth on the NFC East, but I think I feel pretty comfortable in saying they're going to get around 12 wins and win their division. We get the Raiders here. I'm going to put the Raiders in this tier. On paper, the Raiders' defense last year is not good. And Patrick Graham, another really underrated coach, coached them up really well, really solid defense. Obviously, it was a disaster. Josh McDaniels, Jimmy G, they moved on from both of them. Antonio Pierce, obviously, at the team point at a much better level. They even beat the Chiefs on Christmas, which, again, cannot stand the Chiefs. So that was a nice Christmas present for me when the Chiefs lost that day. On paper, I think, honestly, all the Raiders are missing from being maybe a peer is a quarterback. Gardner Minshew, serviceable. He's, he's a game manager. He'll put up solid numbers, but he's not going to win you. He's not going to get you to the Super Bowl or anything like that. And I think he fit Shane Steichen's system really well last year. Shane Steichen, very quarterback friendly system. He had Herbert, then he had Hurts. He turned those guys into monsters. I think all the Raiders are really missing is a quarterback. I think they're going to win, I could say, probably around 5 to 7-ish games this year. I'm going to leave them in this tier. Packers, I'm going to put the Packers here, which might be a little controversial. Matter of fact, I'll even put them right behind the Lions here. I was going to switch. I'll leave it like that. But getting back to the Packers here, Packers, obviously, they only went 9-8 last year, but they turned it up at the end of the year. They were phenomenal against Dallas, obviously the wild card. They should have beaten the 49ers in the divisional round. They outplayed them for most of the game, and then the Niners, obviously after that, missed field goal at the end of the game there from blanking on his name, Anders Carlson. Yep, that's his name. I think they just cut him. He had a shaky year last year. And anyway, after that, the Niners marched down the field, scored, and then Love kind of had that bad pick on a chance to tie or even win the game there. But I think they're going to be a beast this year. There's a scenario in my head where I could see them kind of struggling to start the year, towards the middle of the year. They're kind of win one, lose one, vice versa. They're around 500, and then they turn it up at the end of the year. But I think they have a pretty favorable schedule especially to start the year. I think I have them winning, I want to say 6 of their first 8 games, maybe in 7. I think 6. I think they're going to be a beast this year. I actually have them getting to the NFC Championship. I think Josh Jacobs is going to be an absolute unit. He, behind the Packers offensive line with Matt LaFleur, probably my most underrated coach in the league. Matt LaFleur is such a great game planner, scheme wise, things like that. I love Matt LaFleur, his offensive scheme. I love breaking it down on film and watching people analyze it. His offense is probably one of my favorite offenses I've ever watched. I love Matt LaFleur. Defensively, they fired Joe Barry, who, I honestly don't think he was as bad as people say he was, but the Packers even played really good in the playoffs too. I think it probably was the right decision to move on from him. They got the guy from Boston College, completely blanking on his name, but I don't know. I'm not a big college guy. I don't know much about him, but apparently he's a really solid DC. The Packers defense looked pretty good in the preseason, and don't want to make or base a lot off the preseason, but I think the Packers defense looked pretty good in the preseason. I think they're in a unit this year. I have a Lions Packers NFC Championship game actually, and I went back and forth, but I very slightly picked the Lions over them to make it to the Super Bowl. But I would have loved to see this NFC Championship last year, though. That would have been very interesting to see how that played out. And honestly, bold prediction here. The Packers had made it. They beat the Niners. They beat the Lions. I think I don't know if I want to say they would have beat the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, but I very much think it's a realistic chance. But anyway, that's a what if. Washington, I'm gonna put them here. I think the Commanders could be a sleeper team this year. They get Jane Daniels, not a big college guy, but it seems like put up really impressive numbers. He has Cliff Kingsbury as his OC, who obviously he coached Kyler and with his pro years, even in college. Jaden Daniels is a similar play style to Kyler, so I think Cliff Kingsbury and him are going to be a good match. Cliff Kingsbury teams have started out hot the past couple of years with the Cardinals, and then as the year goes on, they kind of fizzle out once teams get more film on them, prepare for them better. But so to start the year, the Commanders could be kind of a sneaky sleeper team, especially week 1 at the Bucs. That's an interesting. I have the Bucs right now, but I'm kind of back and forth on it. I might pick the Commanders. I don't know. But anyway, defensively, they got Dan Quinn there. Obviously, really good defensive coach from Dallas. He was with the Legion of Boom. Really good defensive coach. He knows what he's doing. He's going to coach them up to be a really good defense. Offensively, I was just talking about Kingsbury. They could start out hot. I think it's a really good match with him and Jaden Daniels, but again, they're in the rebuilding stage, and I think they know that. I think they could be kind of a scrappy sleeper team, though, but I'm going to leave them here for now. Cardinals, I'm gonna put them there too. Out of these teams, I think the Cardinals definitely are the best. I'll leave the Giants. There we go. Cardinals last year, talk about losing close games. They were, I want to say, 1-7, and a lot of their losses were extremely close. Week 1, they were up against the Commanders in the 4th. They blew it. Week 2, they blew a 21-0 lead to the Giants. Josh Dobbs and their offense is pretty. It was supposed to be an absolute disaster class on offense, but Drew Petzing did a pretty good job coordinating. He got better as the year went on. I think Jonathan Gannon, I'm going to put him in an underrated coach category. He gets a lot of hate from Philly fans. I think big reasons because of the Super Bowl. The second half, he really could not stop the Chiefs' offense, struggled to adjust, but you're going against Andy Reid, so. Sorry, guys. Again, if something's stuck in my throat, sorry. Apologies. But again, going against Andy Reid in the Super Bowl, I'm going to kind of give him a pass for that one, even though he did have all that talent. The Eagles that year were really, I want to say, 4th-ranked defense. And the year prior, when they went 9-8, his first year, they had a really good defense too. think Gannon's a good defensive coach. Cardinals defense had times last year they looked really good. They were a scrappy team last year, especially when they got Kyler back. They've improved a lot. Marvin Harrison Jr. Obviously, I think he's going to be a tank this year too. I think the Cardinals are around a 5 to 7 win team this year, and I think they're going to be a really scrappy team that gives a lot of team trouble. Steelers, I'm going to put them at missing the playoffs. I'll put them in front of the Raiders, though. Obviously, Mike Tomlin has his above or 500 or better record at line, but or on the line rather. But I think Russell Wilson. I do think Russell Wilson could have a decent year, but the Steelers are just for years they've kind of just been leveling around mediocre, however you want to phrase it. And I think this year is when it really, excuse me, guys, this thing will not get out of my throat. But I think, I think this year is when it really starts to show. I have them at 7 wins. I feel pretty comfortable with that. They defensively, they're always good defense, especially under Tomlin. They'll be fine defensively. Offensively, I like the Arthur Smith hire. A lot of people don't. He obviously very far did not exceed expectations, and I'm blanking on the word for not exceeding expectations for some reason, but whatever. But he did not exceed expectations in Atlanta. He did not utilize Pitts in London, very consistently. He definitely I liked Arthur Smith as a play caller, but as a head coach and play caller, it seemed like he did not utilize his weapons as efficiently and as much as he should have. I just drafted Pitts in one of my leagues, so I'm going to really hope Kirk Cousins doesn't do the same thing. But anyway, I think Arthur Smith is a good fit for the Steelers. I do think he's good OC, like I'm talking about. Outside of Pickens, they really don't have many receivers, though. I do think Fields is going to get playing time, whether it's Russ playing bad, they pull him, or I think they're definitely going to use Fields in packages, option packages, stuff like that. I think the Steelers will be solid enough to win around 7 games this year. I feel pretty good saying that. Up next, we get the Bills. I'm going to put the Bills in playoff teams. Out of these teams, I definitely, yeah, I'll leave that. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to put them ahead of the Dolphins. I think the Bills will definitely make the playoffs. They have lost a lot of pieces this offseason, a bunch of injuries, but Sean McDermott, again, I'm a Pats fan, so I hate the Bills, not a big Sean McDermott fan, but I respect him. He's always coaches a solid defense. Their defense will be fine. Obviously, they got Josh Allen. They lost Diggs and Gabe Davis. They lost a lot of people. There's the free agency or injury. I definitely think that's going to affect them a lot. Joe Brady, I really liked Joe Brady when he took over the offense last year, how he called it. Much more emphasizing the run, short passing. I really like his offense, even though it tanked Josh Allen's numbers a lot. But I really, really like the way Joe Brady called the offense last year. I think, despite all the injuries, they're going to be competing with the Dolphins and Jets for the AFC East. A lot of people have the Bills winning it. I actually have the Jets winning the division. So by default, that means the Bills are going to have to be a wild card team. I definitely think they'll make the playoffs, so I'm not going to put them in potential wild cards. Falcons, throw the Falcons here. I'll throw them right here. I think the Falcons can win the NFC South. I think it's kind of a coin flip between them and the Bucs, though. But I'll give the Falcons the edge. I think Kirk Cousins, they've just pretty much been a quarterback away. Even last year, with Ridder, as awful as he played for most of the year, and Arthur Smith's kind of questionable play calling at times, they were right there. They were floating around 500 the whole year. They started out 2-0. Even the last week with a losing record, week 18, they still could have won the division. Kirk Cousins, obviously the big addition. They got Raheem Morris, who again, I think, which last year problem was not defense. They had a really, really good defense with Ryan Nielsen coordinating the defense. I really like Ryan Nielsen. Great, great job coordinating the Falcons defense last year. I'll talk about him with the Jags. He went there. But staying on the Falcons, I think their offense will be, good enough, pretty efficient. Their defense will be pretty efficient. I think all they just need was a quarterback. I think they definitely lack a little bit at receiver outside of London. And then Pitts the tight end, but if you want to throw him in there. I think the Falcons, I feel pretty comfortable saying they're a 10, 11 win team. I think they'll win the South. So I'm going to leave them there. Seahawks, I'm going to put them just missing the playoffs. I think Seahawks are another sleeper team. I don't want to have too many sleeper teams, so I definitely think the Seahawks are one. People are acting like Seahawks are one of the worst teams in the league. They had a winning record last year, as much as they seemed to drop off as the season went on. Obviously, Geno was not as efficient as he was 2 years ago, but they finished with a winning record still. Obviously, Mike McDonald's, I talked about the Ravens, really, really good, fantastic defensive coach. Fantastic defensive coach. I think he's some pieces in Seattle. They're gonna have a really stout defense. And again, don't want to base too much off of the preseason here, but they look really good in the preseason for the most part. I think the offense will be solid enough with Geno. They still got Lockett. They got Metcalf. I think they're going to be a sleeper team. They could beat some really good like I have them beating the 49ers in one of their two meetings. I think they could contend for a playoff spot, but I think they're just going to miss out. I think they're a 7-8 win team this year. Oh boy. As much as this is going to pain me to do, I'm going to throw us right here. I honestly think we have a better chance than the Broncos at winning the number one pick. Oh boy, where do I even start with this team? So, obviously, we let Bill go. I was a little surprised we didn't hire Mike Vrabel. It looked like that's what we were going to do at first. We hired Mayo. I'm okay with that. Obviously, don't know too much about Mayo as a coach yet. He's great with us as a player. But I'm okay with Mayo for now. Good to see as the season goes on. I do not have very high hopes for us this season. But yeah, obviously we're starting Brissett over May. It's probably only a matter of time until Brissett gets pulled and May gets thrown in there. I'm okay with starting Brissett over May for now, at least. I understand why I would like to see Drake May in there right away, but I understand why Brissett's starting over him. Obviously, the experience, they don't just want to throw May right in there. But May did look good. He looked pretty good in the preseason, even though it was very limited. He looked better than Brissett in the preseason. But again, I understand why he threw Brissett in there. Receivers, we basically, I'm okay with our receiving core for now. We basically have a bunch of wide receiver twos kind of stacked on top of each other. I like Baker and Polk. I like those picks. Bourne, I'm a big Kendrick Bourne guy. Obviously, he's hurt though, towards ACL last year. We cut Juju. Did not work out with us at all. The only game he really had, he played good against the Steelers in like the first quarter last year, the Thursday game we won, but that was pretty much about it. He also had that awful pass that led to the interception to lose to Washington last year. Oh God, wow, we were so bad last year. But defensively, I think we're actually gonna have a pretty stout defense, pretty top tier defense. I would honestly say, I would put us in the top 12 defenses in the league, honestly. Robert Covington, don't know too much about him, but I like him. He seems like he's knows what he's doing. Again, don't want to base too much off the preseason, but we played really good in the preseason. Our defense did. Yeah, I think defensively will be fine. Obviously, Mayo's a defensive guy, played linebacker for us. I think we're gonna have a pretty stout defense. I just think we're gonna very much struggle offensively this year. Obviously we let Bill O'Brien go. I like to hire an offensive coordinator for us, but he talked about how he wants us to be the top screen team in the game, which I like that. Obviously, that's a big New England scheme, so I like how he's keeping that. What else about the Patriots? Yeah, I'm a big Alex Van Pelt. I like Alex Van Pelt. And coordinators in the past that have been they're listed as the OC or DC if they haven't called plays. It's worked out really well when they get hired as a head coach, like Mike McDaniel. Obviously, that's a big example. Kevin O'Connell, that's another big example. I just think we're going to struggle offensively this year, but I do think we could be sneaky. Our defense is going to keep us in games if our offense can just kind of get it together. I think I have us at 4 wins, but I could see 5, 6 wins for us, maybe. I don't think we get less than 4, though. But I think, unfortunately, this is going to be another rough year for us. We get the Browns. I'm going to put the Browns right here. Do I put them in front of the... you know what? Probably controversial, but I'll just leave them. I'm pretty high in the Browns this year. I have them at 12-5. That's probably more than most people. I want to say 11-6, but I do have them at 12-5, even though I think feel a little bit more comfortable saying 11-6. I'm going to leave them at 12-5. They won 11 games last year, and they had basically, 4 different quarterbacks. They had Flacco, or they had Watson, then they had DTR, then they had PJ. Actually, they had Flack. No, okay, they had Watson, PJ Walker, DTR. They had Flacco, and they still won 11 games. And then they were beat up defensively, offensively. Obviously, they lost Chubb. They won 11 games. Obviously, they're healthy this year. Chubb's working to get back. I think he's going to miss at least the first 4 games. They put him on the PUP list. Their defense did get a little predictable with Jim Schwartz towards the end of the year, though. Their defense started to get a little bit torched as the year progressed. But most notably, obviously, in the wild card game with the Texans and Stroud, who's up next, actually, now that I'm looking at this. But I think their defense is going to be, again, one of the top tier defenses. I like Kevin Stefanski. Think he's a really good play caller. It seems like he does get a little bit too pass heavy sometimes, but I really like Stefanski. He has really good schemes offensively. I like Stefanski. I'm high on the Browns. I'm going to give them 12 wins and a wild card berth because I had the Bengals winning the division. Texans, a little back and forth on these 2 tiers. I'm going to leave them here for now, but could be swayed to leave them there. I'm going to leave them here for now. As a matter of fact, I'll even put them in the front of this list. I am high on the Texans this year. Obviously, they added Diggs. They were really good last year. Obviously, far exceeded expectations. They won 10 games. They beat the Browns in the wild card. They were tied with the Ravens, and then the Ravens just blew them out the second half. DeMeco Ryans really knows how to call a defense. Great defensive coach. Offensively, obviously Stroud, Diggs, Dell, Collins. That's ridiculous. They get Joe Mixon. I think Texans going to have a year similar to last year. A couple more wins. I think I have them at 11-6, but I can see 12. 13 might be pushing it, but I guess it's possible. I definitely think they make the playoffs and they win the South, though. Chiefs, oh God, as much as this pains me to do, they're probably the Super Bowl favorites. Well, they are the Super Bowl favorites now. Can't stand the Chiefs. Not too much talk about that people don't already know about them. They get Mahomes, Reed, Kelsey. I think he'll have a bounce back year now that they actually got some receivers this year. They don't just have Kelsey solely like they did last year, besides Rashee Rice. Offensively, they lost Snead, but they're really good at developing corners and DBs. So I think they'll be fine there. Steve Spagnuolo really knows how to call a defense, so I think defensively they're going to be just as good, if not better than last year. Offensively, I think they're going to be better than last year. They're probably, I think I had them at 13 wins, but would not be surprised if they win 14 or 14, maybe even 15, but I'm going to leave it at 13. Obviously, they're Super Bowl favorites. Unfortunately, God help us all. The 3-peat Cowboys, definitely the Cowboys in the playoffs. I'll leave them here. Cowboys got worse on paper than they were last year. They lost some guys. Obviously, Dan Quinn, that's a big loss defensively. Mike Zimmer, pretty good defensive coach. He's another aggressive play call with his blitzes and such. Mike McCarthy running the offense was pretty good last year as the year got on, once they got their footing underneath them. Think Dak and CeeDee could have monster years. I think Zeke, that's a pretty good signing for them to bring him back. I really like Zeke on the Pats last year. I think the Cowboys, they got worse on paper, but they're going to be a year similar to last year. I think I have them at 11 wins. I feel pretty comfortable with that. I think they'll definitely sneak in. Not even sneak in. I think they'll just make the playoffs. Chargers, I have them missing out on the playoffs just barely. I think I had them at 9-8. Obviously, their big issue is receiver. They pretty much do not have any receivers for Herbert or Herbert except McConkey, who they drafted, but again, he's a rookie. So he's kind of a question mark how he performs in the NFL. Obviously, Jim Harbaugh, that's the big signing for them. They still get a solid defense. Herbert, I think, is going to be good enough to, by himself, make the offense pretty efficient. I think the Chargers, they're going to have a. I think they're going to start off. They're going to beat some teams that are going to surprise people. I have them upsetting the Chiefs. I want to say they play. I forget which week early in the year, but it's relatively early in the year. I think I have them upsetting the Chiefs then. I think the Chargers could definitely upset some teams that people are going to be a little surprised at, and I think the Chargers are also going to lose to some teams that people are surprised at. Like I think they play the Broncos. I could see the Broncos upsetting them, but just a team like that, they'll lose to the teams that people think they're going to beat, and they'll win against the teams they think they're going to lose against. I definitely a couple of those. I think I have them at 9-8. I think they'll be a pretty good team. And Brandon Staley definitely needed to go. Jim Harbaugh, great hire. I love Jim Harbaugh. Jets, 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 Jets. Huh. I'm gonna throw the Jets. I'll throw them right here. You know what? Matter of fact, I'll even throw the Eagles in front of the Ravens. Why not? Jets, I have at 12-5. I actually have them winning the AFC East. I think they're going to be a tank this year with Rodgers back. Obviously, this is assuming Rodgers is healthy and makes it through the whole year. I think the Jets are going to be just a great team this year. Obviously, really good defense with Robert Saleh. Really good defense last year. Even when Zach Wilson, they were competing. They were around 500. They beat the Eagles last year when the Eagles are red hot. They were the first to lose the Eagles had last year. And they had a rotation of quarterbacks. They had Simeon and they had Tim Boyle, and it was just a disaster. Then Hackett, I don't think is a good offensive coordinator, but with Rodgers, he works well. With Rodgers running the offense and Saleh running the defense, I think the Jets are an absolute tank this year. I have them at 12 wins. I think I have them starting 7-1 even. They have a pretty favorable schedule to start the year. So yeah, I have the Jets there. Panthers, I'm throwing that. You could make an argument for them to be here. I'll throw them here. I just think the Panthers are still pieces away. I like the Dave Canales hire. I think that's a pretty good hire. I think he'll work well with Bryce Young. They're just a couple pieces. I like the Deontay Johnson signing. That was a good one. Thielen's obviously getting up there in age, even though he had a monster year last year. Defensively, Giro Everett, I really like him. He really solid defense. As bad as the Panthers were last year, they had a pretty solid defense. And the same was with the Broncos 2 years ago when he was the DC there. I'm shocked Sean Payton didn't keep him, but Vance Joseph's a pretty solid defensive coordinator. He fits Sean Payton's system, so I get why Sean Payton hired him. Vance Joseph's an okay DC, but I think Giro Everett's better than he is. Really good, just a solid all-around defense to the Panthers. As bad as they were, people don't talk about it because of how terrible they were last year. But really solid defense. I think their defense will play, to the same level as last year. They're getting some injuries too, though. I think their offense will be better than last year. That's not saying much. I think they're only due for kind of a couple wins. Do not see them making a lot of noise this year. Titans. This is a sleeper team. A lot of people have the Titans being one of the worst teams in the league. I think I only have them projected at 5 wins. I'll honestly be shocked if they get below that. I think they're probably going to win between 5 and 7 games, 5 at minimum, like 7, maybe even 8. That might be stretching a bit, but Titans, I think, are going to be the definition of what a scrappy team is. They're going to compete hard. They're going to compete neck and neck with the elite teams. They're going to beat some of the bad teams. They're going to probably lose to some teams that are evenly matched them, like Steelers, Raiders teams like that. Will Levis I like Will Levis, what I saw from him last year. Brian Callahan, I think, is a really good hire. Really like the Brian Callahan hire. And talking about OCs that didn't call the plays that worked out successful, Brian Callahan, I think, is going to fall under that. Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins, that's a nasty combo. Obviously, losing Henry, that's a big loss. But they got Pollard, Tyjae Spears, 2 solid backs. Really like Tyjae Spears. I like Pollard too, but I think Spears, I think I like Spears a little better. Defensively, the Titans are going to have a stout defense, I think. Just an all-around scrappy team. Them and the Bears, I'm back and forth on who I want to pick week 1. Most people are picking the Bears. I am too, but I might change my pick. I'm not sure yet. Titans, I think, can make noise and seriously contend with some good teams this year. I think they're a sleeper team. Colts, I'm going to leave the Colts there. Colts, obviously, really good year last year. They far over exceeded expectations. Just missed out on the playoffs. If Goodson had caught that ball on 4th and 1 against the Texans, they probably drive down and score. They're in the playoffs. Then the Browns that last year had a neck and neck game, that a shootout. The Browns should have lost the game, but they got bailed out on a flag. So the Colts should have beaten the Browns. Maybe they would have beaten the Browns last year, but who knows? Anyway, Richardson, hopefully he can stay healthy. He looked pretty solid last year. Obviously, he just got hurt a bunch, and then I think week 1 he got hurt 2 separate times, and then obviously he got hurt a couple weeks in, was out for the year. Minshew, really, really solid for them. Shane Steichen, again, I think he works well with Richardson. He works well with any quarterback. Really pro-friendly. Sorry, something's still stuck in my throat here. Friendly quarterback offense. Defensively, I like Gus Bradley. Solid DC. The defense played well most of the year last year. I think they'll do the same this year. I think I only have the Colts at 6 wins, but all right, excuse me, guys. I think I only have the Colts at 6 wins, but I'll honestly be surprised if they only win 6 games. It's just hard trying to navigate each team's record, docking a team a loss, adding a win. It's just kind of hard. I think the Colts will probably be a 7-win team. I think last year might have been kind of a Cinderella year for them. Although I could see them having a year this year like they did last year, getting around 9 wins, something like that. But for now, I'm just going to leave them there. The Jaguars, I am going to leave them here. Actually, you know what? I'm going to leave them there. I'm going to leave the Jags there. A lot of people are down on the Jaguars. Obviously, they completely collapsed at the end of the year last year. And, Trevor Lawrence was hurt. He tried playing, was banged up. Then they had Beathard in there, who actually played pretty solid for them for the most part. He had a couple bad losses. As I talked about, they hired Ryan Nielsen as their DC. Really like Ryan Nielsen. Think they're going to have a really solid defense. Mike Caldwell did okay, but the defense, definitely some questionable coaching decisions at times. Their defense, and I thought Mike Caldwell did a better job than most people think. Ryan Nielsen, they'll really like that hire. Offensively, obviously they lost Ridley to the Titans. I completely forgot about him when I was signing with. Or did I mention him? No, I forget. But regardless, they lost Ridley. That's going to be a big loss. They get Christian Kirk, though. Really like Christian Kirk. Gabe Davis, he's the definition of boom or bust every game. I think Trevor Lawrence gets a lot of hate. Definitely turns it over too much. I like Trevor Lawrence. I think he's a really solid quarterback. Offensively, I think they'll be fine. Defensively, I think they'll be pretty stout. I am not as low on the Jags as most people are. I think the Jags are around a 9-10 win team and could definitely see them making the wild card. Okay, do I want to rearrange anything here? John, since I have the Bengals in the Super Bowl, I'm gonna have to move them here. I would even put them in front of the Niners. Actually, no, I'm not. Yeah, that looks good. Um, you know what? I'll rearrange the Falcons and Cowboys. These three, I'm not sure. These three can kind of go in any order here. Um, yeah, I'm pretty comfortable. I'll put the Jag. Yeah, I'll do that. Um, yeah, this looks pretty solid to me. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna downgrade the Raiders into this category. I'll put the Steelers, downgrade them there too. I'll even put the Steelers ahead of them though. Seahawks, Chargers. Yeah, I think that's good. I think that's good, and I think that's good. All right, so hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I plan on making a bunch of more content later. So yeah, as the season goes on, I'm going to make articles, YouTube videos like this, make a bunch of content to get my thoughts out there. I'm a big sports guy, talk about sports 24/7. So this is my platform to do so pretty much. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. And yeah, I'll catch you guys next time. Have a good one, guys.